Lord, I pray that you will always um, prune any selfish ambition, any desire to perform, any desire to keep up with church trend. And I pray that you would prune any space in our hearts and in our souls that that takes up capacity that could be filled with your spirit, your pure spirit of goodness, of life. And you've commanded us to be filled with your spirit. We can't do that. To do that means that we have to be fully dependent upon you and receptive to when your spirit desires to pour in. And so, Lord, we just present ourselves available to you. Thank you for your grace and forgiveness where we fill our bellies, we fill our hearts, we fill our minds, we fill our calendars and expend our energy on things that ultimately will not fulfill. We trust in your spirit of truth and of goodness. We trust in the finished work of Jesus that allows us to have oneness with your spirit and give us relationship with the Father. And so we surrender and commend ourselves to your spirit to do a shaping work in our hearts, Lord. Jesus, amen. Kids, later, get out of here. Hey, the nursery's open too, I think, if you guys want to go in there, but you don't have to, Andrew. I'm just glad to see you, bro. Like, the babies can make noise. It's all good. Most of us are parents here, so we're not turned off by any of that. At home, if you guys couldn't hear the guitar, sorry, we don't know. I don't know. I just see good-looking guys working on it tirelessly, trying to figure it out. So sorry about that. If that was a distraction to your opportunity to focus on Jesus. Not sorry if it was a performance that you didn't like, because that's not really our goal. Hey, I need your guys' help a little bit this morning, because there's two types of people in this world. Those who enjoy wrestling and those who don't. Okay? I'm talking about like WWE wrestling and those who don't. I'm not really a WWE fella. Like, that's not really my jam, okay? No judgment. I have close friends that are down with the WWE thing, right? Are any of you here worldwide wrestling people? No? It sounds like you sounds like there might have been a time when you fell into this camp, and that's okay, no judgment. I mean, when I was a kid, there was a little bit of the old school, like Hulk Hogan thing where I thought, but then I discovered that I feel like some of the, when it was WWF, no, it's not the same, right? A whole different acronym, whole different level of falsehood. I don't know. But so forgive me, and if anybody at home or anybody's not willing to admit how loyal you are to that whole vibe, I'm sorry. No judgment. Like, do you? Right? I'm just not that guy. But as I was reading the scriptures this week, I had this vision of WrestleMania, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but WrestleMania is when all the wrestlers, and let me also say this, as a guy that's working in the entertainment industry doing stunts for like 16, 17 years, I have a huge respect for the performance that these guys put on, okay? So I will say that. Like, these dudes, they are big, strong, athletic men and women. It's impressive. And they do some acrobatic stuff that I'm not doing, okay? But it is a stunt performance. So when we look at it within its own context, there is some things that are really impressive about this stuff. I just wouldn't call it wrestling. Nevertheless, the picture that they present for like the WrestleMania, correct me if I'm wrong, that's when like everybody comes out. Is that what it is? Right? Justin, you got me? Okay. So like everybody comes out and there's like different teams and loyalties, but it's just a mess of a brawl. And chairs are getting thrown and people are diving into the crowds. And but it looks like just mayhem, right? And so as I was reading the scriptures this week, going through James, we're gonna finish up James this week, and next week we'll be done. We'll finish up on Father's Day. I hope you guys have been enjoying the journey through James, diving in for yourself. Typically, it's a book that can be read in like 15, 20 minutes. And in the past, when I've gone through James, I usually read it like daily. This time, I've just been kind of taking my time as we go through it together, journey through it together. But as I was going through the end of chapter 4 and the beginning of chapter 5, I started to get uncomfortable in this space. And the arena of my heart began to look a little bit like WrestleMania. And one verse would say one thing, and my heart would say another, and then another verse would say another thing, and my heart would say another thing, and then chairs started getting thrown, and it got wild up in here, verse after verse, man. And remember, James is the little brother of Jesus, and what I realized is, man, like little bro don't play. He was schooled in old school Jewish culture. But then his brother was teaching stuff like Sermon on the Mount. And so it's like this poetic, beautiful kick in the treasure, right? And it's pretty, little bro's not playing around with this one. And it starts to get real in our hearts. And the thing is, though, the battles that we face and the wrestling match that we endure with this tension between what I'm going to say is two worlds, this wrestling match and this tension between two worlds is you've got the world and reality that we live in, and then we've got this kingdom reality that transcends this world, that is also very real, that we are promised, and that we tap into and engage, and that we pray that kingdom would come and enter in and expose the falsehood of the world that we live in. I hope you're tracking with me, right? And so there ain't nothing fake about these battles that we got going on, these battles that James is about to expose for us. And so I just want to invite you to engage and wrestle with these scriptures with me. We're going to look at it in 3 parts. And I believe what we're going to discover, that I discovered, is that when we make plans, really we can't make plans apart from God's will. And when we begin to make plans apart from God's will, what tends to happen is we take advantage of others for the sake of performing our will. When we make plans and operate and function outside of God's will, we start to take advantage of others to push forward our agenda of our will and our desire within this world, right? And what we really have to do when we're in this uncomfortable place, this uncomfortable arena that we play in, that we live, work, and play in this world, as we persevere the trials, the temptation is, that James has been talking about, the temptation is to act out of character. The temptation is to manipulate for our will to be done and our security to be met within the confines of this world. That's the temptation. But what God is asking us and sends word through James is to be patient and persevere and to keep our eyes fixed and focused on the very real riches of his kingdom. Okay? So we can't make plans outside of God's will, because when we do, we take advantage of others, and we need to be patient and keep our eyes focused on the real riches that he has for us. So those are kind of the three hunks or movements that we'll see as this wrestling match plays out. And maybe I'm just the only one, man. We'll see what goes on in your heart as we read through this. So go to James chapter 4. I have my journal up here. Really, it's symbolic. I might use it some as you're turning to James chapter 4. I want to encourage us, man, keep this journal thing going. It may not be daily, but I want to challenge us to continue to engage the journal. Make our thoughts and revelations and processing tangible. So just encouraging you guys, when you come, bring a journal with you. If you do it in your phone, that's cool. We'll have a moment of reflection at the end of when I'm done talking, hopefully sooner rather than later. We'll have a moment of reflection. You guys can jot down some of the processing that's going on in your hearts, all right? James chapter 4, verse 13. I like to read these first couple words as come on now, right? He says, come now. It's like, now listen. However it speaks to your personality, like that's the language. It's, hey, come on now. Listen up. It says, come on now, you who say, today or tomorrow, we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Yet you don't even know what your life will be like tomorrow. Am I the only one that kind of has that? I mean, this one is like, come on now, you who say this. Like, that's a statement that I think a lot of us can relate to. I don't know about you, but I've said those same things. Now, this is not a rebuke on if you have ambition and you desire to go, like, do great things. Like, we all are called to live in a city and put in some work and make some money, and that's okay. Like, something's got to drive you every day to get up and go to do work. But what this is talking about is arrogant scheming apart from God's will. All right? Nevertheless, it's still likely talking to us. All right? So come on now. You say today or tomorrow we're going to go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. You don't even know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. My daughter, 5 years ago when we came to be a part of this community, she was 8. And Friday, she graduated middle school. I told her, I said, girl, congrats, man. You done made it through arguably the most awkward stage of life. Good job. High school's no joke. Adulthood is no joke, right? But you did that. Like, that's to be celebrated, and we did, right? But the crazy thing is like, to me, that's evidence of just how. I mean, Tim's in town, like, you're dropping your kid off at college, dude. Sorry. I mean, it's great. Commission him into manhood. Like, he's got what it takes, but ouch. Like, this world is just torturous, isn't it? How fast this thing goes. Oh my gosh. I talk about it daily. It's criminal. It's injustice, man. It's not fair how fast this world goes. You know, we used to have to discipline ourselves to pull out the old photo albums at like family holidays and stuff, right? But now our phones daily call us to reflect. And if you were with us last week, didn't we talk about how strength and growth comes with vulnerable self-reflection? It's so important because we have to cherish how valuable, and we know. Who are we to say we're going to do this, that, and the other when, man, this life just like a vapor, is gone quick. So that verse tugs at my heartstrings, and it puts me in check. It's like, yeah, what am I doing even thinking? Like, what's the point of even planning, right? But James checks us, and he says, He says, instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. So he's talking about don't boast. Don't boast in your plans, in your agendas, in your schemes, and what you will or will not do. He's saying, man, you can have some plans, but if you do that apart from God's will, you're missing the mark, man. You got no business planning apart from God's will. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills it, you will live and also do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. So he says, therefore, so this is what we do instead. To one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. This is called the sin of omission, right? When we omit the things that we know God has called us to do for the sake of our own agendas and our own pursuits, leaving God's will out of the mix of our planning, out of the mix of our processing. It's not saying you're wrong for having desires to go to work and do great things. It's not what it's saying. But when your arrogant schemes and your agendas are put before your pursuit of God's will in this small end dash of a life, you guys know what the end dash is? It's the dash, when somebody dies and it's that line between your birth date and the date that you passed. It's the end dash. And there's a beautiful poem that you should look up and Google later. Beautiful poem about the dash. I think it's just called the dash. But that dash of a life that we have, this vapor of a life, this mist, this moment, when we don't inject and infuse God's will and his purpose and plan, it's meaningless. So we can't make plans apart from God's will. And then James, he really starts, so he already said, come on now. He says it again, come on now. Listen up. You rich, in verse 5, come on now, you rich. And I don't know about you, but that ain't talking to me, right? Is anybody because a lot of times we like to do that in the scriptures, pick and choose what's talking to us and what's not. Like Paul writes to the Ephesians and he calls out husbands, but husbands don't like to really pay attention to where it says, hey, husbands. Usually it's the wives that like to pay attention to those verses. And then Paul also writes, hey, wives, and then the wives don't like to read those verses, and the husbands like to call those. We like to memorize those scriptures, right, that are for the other person, right? So if you're like me, I might come on now, you rich. All right, cool, he ain't talking to me. But then I'm like, hold on, maybe he is talking to me. Check myself. Well, raise your hand if he's talking. No, I'm just kidding. He's going to start talking to the people who and this has kind of been a theme throughout James, right? He's called people to recognize their wealth and to humble themselves. And we're going to talk more about kind of the context of this. But let's figure out if he's talking to us or not. We live in California. The average income is somewhere around 70 grand, right? That's like 30 or 40 more than the average income in the rest of America. The average household income is well over, I think the median income in California is like $76,000. Yeah. Per capita, I think, is still way above the rest of the nation. And so the truth is, everything's relative, cool. If you feel like you don't have enough, this might be talking to you. This might be talking to us. If you feel like you need a little bit more, this might be talking to you. If you are not secure in your financial state, man, this might be talking to you. If you live in America, the context of these people, it's so funny, man. The Bible's so real, it's so good. The context of these people, if you had more than one outfit, you was pretty well off. if you had more than one outfit. They had a coat, and that was like they had a robe, and that's what they wore. A robe and an undergarment. That's what they wore. So if you have a closet with clothes, you might be okay. And I just loved when I read your email yesterday, Tim, and I knew we were talking about this because Tim lives in Papua New Guinea. I had to look that up on the map. That is in the middle of like there's Bakersfield that's like in the middle of nowhere, California, and then there's Papua New Guinea that's in the middle of nowhere in the ocean of the world. Like that's truly nowhere, right? You must have to go through culture shock every time you come back here, and then every time you go back there. These two different worlds, man. And so remember, little bro don't play. So he's like, here, let me serve you up a nice little piece of this humble pie. Y'all doing all right. We're doing all right, guys. We're sitting here. I mean, come on, man. We're doing all right. Free donuts and coffee out there. We're doing just fine. We might not be able to shower every day for much longer out here in California, but we're doing just fine. And I'm not saying these things to shame you. I'm saying them to speak them into my own heart because I wrestle with these things. Remember, the wrestling match is going on in my own heart. Come on now, you rich. I ain't rich. I'm rich. Yeah, I'm rich. Some people would love to have my bank account, but I'm rich in the Lord. But I'm just not rich enough. See? Chairs being thrown all up in there. He says, listen now, you rich. Weep and howl for your miseries which are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments have become moth-eaten. Your gold and your silver have rusted, and their rust will be a witness against you and will consume your flesh like fire. Man, we keep these Goodwills and Salvation Armies open, don't we? With our junk, with our moth-eaten, rusted junk, right? Let me tell you something. You better be good to those brothers on Roscoe over there at Salvation Army, because Goodwill's starting to be picky with their donations, right? You know. Now I'm not trying to, if you're a Goodwill person, whatever, but like. We keep these places open with our junk because we just hoard masses and masses of stuff and put our identity in it. And it's just stuff, man. It's just stuff. And just side note too, when you go drop stuff off at these Goodwills and Salvation Army, please show some love to these cats, man. They are out there in the heat trying to get their lives right. Take them some water. Take them a Slurpee or something this summer when you're going through your garages, okay? This is just completely off topic, just, man, and not at the same time, but just like love on these dudes, man, because they are literally, like, how good do you feel when you take a load of stuff and it's like, oh, I got rid of that. And these guys now have to process it and do something with it. Make sure we show these guys a lot of respect. Okay? Anyway. Witness against you and consume your flesh like fire. It is in the last days that you have stored up your treasure. Man, we put so much of our identity in what we have or don't have. Behold, the pay of the laborers, and what's going on here next is the context that there's a bunch of landowners and there's sharecropping going on, and there's people that are becoming more and more in debt to these landowners, and they're taking advantage of other people for the sake of their own security in this world and their own agendas, their own will. They're seeking to perform their own will and have their security and their wealth, and they're taking advantage of others to make it happen. Behold, the pay of the laborers who mowed your fields and which has been withheld by you cries out against you. And the outcry of those who did the harvesting has reached the ears of the Lord of I haven't even practiced saying this because it's not a typo. It's not the Lord of the Sabbath. It's Sabaoth, the Lord of Sabaoth. This is like Jesus's. We're talking WWE wrestling, whatever it is. We're talking about wrestling, right? This is like his wrestling name. This is Jesus' wrestling name, the Lord of Sabaoth. And it's like, oh man, he's letting these wealthy people who are judgmental and in control of society, let them know, look, the Lord of Sabaoth is coming. And he shows up like Hulk Hogan or The Undertaker or whatever it is, Andre the Giant, but it's the Lord of Sabaoth. It's like, remember, there's a Lord. It's the Lord of hosts. What it means is it's the Lord of heaven's armies. And so we think because we get a little money, we get a little treasure, we get a little power, we get a little authority, we get a little promotion, we get some people underneath us that we're leading, and we're finally making our way in this world. It means, hey, remember, there's a Lord of heaven's armies that's watching over you, and the judge is standing at the door. He's coming any moment. You better check yourself and your attitude before you start taking advantage of other people. And you might say, man, we're church folks. We would never take advantage of other people. We wouldn't. The church's been doing that for years, man. We've been taking advantage of people to serve our own needs so we can build our church and have this. So you better be at the potluck. And what are you bringing to the potluck? And are you going to help stay afterwards and clean up after the potluck? And you're going to be here early before to set up the chalkboard and let everybody know what we're having and set up for the potluck. You're doing that, right? Because the church is growing. You better be here. Oh, man. Ugh. Man, do we take advantage of people for our own agendas, to perform and push forward our own will. Sick. Man, that's sick. See, yeah, we'll get to me in a minute. We'll get to me in a minute. The cry of those that we're taking advantage of are reaching the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ugh. The Lord of heaven's armies is hearing the cries of those that we take advantage of. You live luxuriously on the earth with your entitlement, and you led a life of wanton pleasure. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and put to death the righteous man. He does not even resist you, taking advantage of innocent folks. You see the WrestleMania going on? Do you feel that? Because it's really hard. Like, James is like the book of Proverbs or Ecclesiastes that I'm actually going through right now. It's like every verse is like a proverb. You could take out every couple verses and just chew on those by themselves. Just come on now. Listen up. Don't remove the Lord's will from your plans. Stop taking advantage of people. Stop living these entitled lives. Come on now, listen up. And then verse 7 says, therefore, right? So we got these two hunks, and he says, now therefore, be patient, brethren. Be patient, brothers and sisters, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious produce of the soil, being patient about it, until it gets the early and late rains. I don't know about you, but I can't have these conversations without thinking of like need, right? And I feel guilty because it's like, man, we live in America. We don't really need anything. We do live in California. Man, the cost of living is ridiculous. Just having a conversation with somebody the other day. It's like, man, $100,000, it feels like is nothing, right? It's crazy. Then we're told to be patient like the farmer. And there's some early rain, and then sometimes the rain comes late in the harvest and shows up just in time. Verse 8, you too be patient. Strengthen your hearts. Settle down and reflect on how God has shown up in the past, shown up again. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Be encouraged by the fact that the Lord of Sabaoth is coming. Do not complain, brethren, against one another. When you get, I don't know about you, but when I get anxious and vulnerable and tense and stressed, I always take it out on other people. Oh, they've got this, they've got that. Do not complain, brethren, against one another, so that you yourselves may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing right at the door. As an example, brethren, of suffering and patience, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. What that means is think about the life of the prophets. When we look in the Old Testament, man, these prophets, like, they didn't have good, like, it wasn't, oh yeah, the Lord's called me to be a prophet and proclaim and speak out against culture and tell people to turn from their sin. Yippee! Like, these dudes could not separate themselves from God's will. They tried. And they got pushed back, and it was hard. But God saw and honored their obedience and blessed them. And then verse 11 says, we count those blessed who endured. You have heard of the endurance of Job. Was that just last week I referenced Job? Or 2 weeks ago? Was it last week? Last week I referenced Job. So like I said, usually I read through the whole book. When I saw that we were talking about Job, that James referenced Job, I'm like, man, that's awesome, because I didn't even know he was going to reference Job. But we know Job. It says, you have heard of the endurance of Job and have seen the outcome of the Lord's dealings. That the Lord is full of compassion and mercy. We're going to talk about the outcome in a second. Let me look at my notes and make sure I'm not missing anything super important. You can ask me about my opinions of public storage later. I just think it's evil. I think it's evil. I think it's the best. If I had the ability to invest and go to this city or that city and do business and move on, it would probably be public storage. Just taking advantage of people's sin and hoarding. It's the worst. But then I couldn't within God's. I couldn't with a clear conscience just take advantage of people's. Yeah. Anyway. We have to keep our eyes on the very real riches of God's kingdom. Does anybody follow John Crist, the comedian, on social media? Oh man, did you see the one about Lazarus? I'm not going to try and reenact this. There's nothing worse and more dishonorable than trying to perform another comedian's stuff. So you really got to look up his little bit on Lazarus. But what he does is he looks at the Lazarus being raised from the dead. If you don't know who Lazarus is, he's one of Jesus' really good friends that was dead for 4 days, and he raised him from the dead, right? But it was brilliant. He looks at the Lazarus story from Lazarus' perspective. And he's like, man, Lazarus has been in heaven for 4 days. And I mean, wherever you stand theologically, he's at least been in some type of presence of the Lord in a waiting period for 4 days. He's been good for 4 days. Right? He's been in paradise for 4 days. Right? And he's like, man, I'm good. I'm so good. My sisters went to try to get Jesus to take care of this, but he didn't, and I'm glad we're good. He's living it up for 4 days. In a very real reality, you guys understand that heaven is for real. And Lazarus was there for 4 days, and then somebody shows up at his door like, yeah, we don't usually do this, Lazarus. It's even funnier when John's doing it, so don't laugh too hard. Like, yeah, we don't. You got to go back, bro. Sorry. Right? Lazarus was good. And I want to be so comfortable. I pray for comfort every day. I pray for provision, right? And it's like, God's like, I'm not trying to get you to. What if I really started to believe that heaven is for real? What if I really started to believe when Jesus says, you are rich? I've given you everything you need according to my riches. What if we church-going Christian people really started to believe by faith and live according to these scriptures that says that our Father is King of the universe? He's going to give me everything I need. That's all you need. That's what you need. That's exactly what you need right now in this season of life. I got you. But Lord, I got a whole bunch more, and I'm going to give you what you need when you need it. Wouldn't I have so much more peace? So we get in this wrestling match. I get in this wrestling match. It's like, am I rich? Am I not? Do I have what I need, what I don't? Oh my gosh, I got these ambitions, and Lord, I want to go after it. And God's like, you're doing exactly what I need you to do, bro. You good. And I got this wrestling match going on in my heart, but the Lord of Sabaoth shows up, and he's right he's close. So what are you tripping about? What are you worrying about? There is going to come a time when we have full understanding and we're in the very real presence of God within the safety, the confines, where we get to see the whole dowry, dude. Like, we get to see it all. And we're going to be like, man, what was I tripping about? My water bill? I was tripping about the water bill? I was tripping about my house isn't big enough? Wasn't clean enough? I didn't have that pair of shoes. I didn't have the latest cell phone. I was tripping about what everybody else's lives look like on social media. What was I tripping? The Lord of Sabaoth is going to show up and wreak havoc over WrestleMania in a very real way, a very tangible, the reality and the falsehood of this world is going to be exposed by the reality of heavens and flex all over it and give us full perspective. If we could just learn to be patient and keep our eyes focused on those real, very real, realer than we can imagine, riches that await us. And that's what little bro Jesus' little bro James shows up to let us know. Hey guys, we're good. Be patient. Persevere. I know you're scattered throughout the land and you feel unsettled and it doesn't feel like home. You're out there with a mission. Stick to God's will. Stick to God's plan. Don't make any plans apart from His will. And if there's things that you know you're called to do, because we know that there's things that we're called to do in this word, He said, make sure you do that. Because if you miss those things, man, you're in sin. Don't miss the good that you know you're supposed to do because you're too worried trying to find your security. So what would happen? Here's my question, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to reflect for about 5 minutes. So when you come up, you can come on up if you want. Give you an opportunity to reflect. But what would happen if this became real? If we actually started to believe? And I love that James says at the end of the verses we looked at, the end of verse 11, he says, you heard of Job, the endurance of Job, and you have seen the outcome of the Lord's dealings. You've seen the outcome of the Lord's dealings before, and the outcome for us is not going to be any different. Let me say it again. The outcome for us is not going to be any different. He's still rich in mercy. He's still rich in compassion. He's still your Father. He's still Lord of Sabaoth. He's still Lord of heaven's armies, and He's still mindful of our situations. And He's full. He's full, James used the word. He's filled up with compassion and mercy for us. What might happen if I started to believe these things? What might happen if you started to believe these things? For me, I might not be tempted to be so transactional in my relationships. Because when I meet somebody, my heart, automatically goes, oh, how can this friendship, how can this relationship be used to propel forward my will? Rather than, oh, God's put me in the presence of this person for a reason. How can I love on them? How can I be full of compassion and mercy and care for them? If I believe that my God's got me. My heart won't be to take advantage of others and press forward my plans and my will and my agendas. So if I really believe these things that our Bible says, I might not be so tempted to take advantage of other people. And I might not be so worried and anxious about finance. And I wouldn't put my security in my financial situation and in my bank account or in what the market's doing and freak out when I see red. I'm the only one that scrolls left and sees red and then scrolls back with a bad attitude. I'm not the only one? Okay, cool. Wrestling match, man. Chairs thrown. Jumping off the ropes. I wouldn't be so anxious, man, because I'm secure in the Lord. So I'm just going to give you guys a few minutes to reflect and I'm wondering, can you even play your guitar? Because we can't hear it at home. So you might just be sitting in silence at home, but you guys can hear it a little bit here. Take a few minutes and reflect. If I truly believe these things, how might that impact the way I live? How much more submissive will I be to the Lord's will? How will that change the dynamics of the relationships I have and how I treat other people? If I really believe that the Lord of heaven's armies is coming soon, that the Lord of heaven's armies has made a place for me through Jesus, if I really believe that, how much more security should I be putting and investing in my heavenly promise than in this WrestleMania of a world we live in? How might that impact with you? Just sit with that and reflect for about the next 3 to 5 minutes, and then we'll sing a song, and I'll come up and close us out after that.